I don't know much about the Legacy of Kain franchise, but admittedly, something has always captured my curiosity. No idea why that is, but there was a time where stuff like this was all over the place. Ghosts, witches, warlocks, vampires. But I guess it was just a vibe that just fell off in the mainstream. But a very cult classic franchise that was the headline for this type of world was the PS1 cult classic, Legacy of Kain, and its sequel. Legacy of Kain had a lot of issues throughout its development because of a toxic relationship between Crystal Dynamics and Silicon Knights, causing a bunch of delays and a lot of things hitting the cutting room floor. Fortunately though, the series was pretty well received back in the day, and due to the subject matters and such, the series has seen a pretty good sized cult following. It would go on to receive about 5 games until 2004, and even a 6th game, Dead Sun, was in deep production for what was probably going to be a PlayStation 4 launch title. But it was being developed after Square Enix bought Eidos Montreal, who canned the game and didn't even tell Climax Studios, who were working their butts off for that game for quite a bit before Square Enix finally told them. Not fun. However, people really wanted Legacy of Kain to come back, and hearing about the canceled Dead Sun game really made a lot of people upset, but that's okay, because the next part of the story is even worse. After Crystal Dynamics released the dumpster fire that was that terrible Avengers game, Square Enix decided to just go ahead and sell Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal. Because of the failing Avengers game? Likely, and if they actually had said that, that would have probably gone over way better than saying the actual reason why they sold them, which was because they wanted to pump more money into NFTs. Good going, Square Enix. So now, Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal are with the Embracer Group as of right now, and the fruits of this buyout came with the announcement that Legacy of Kain was being remastered and re-released on all modern platforms, which is fantastic to see, and I'm sure made Legacy of Kain fans really happy. But how are the Legacy of Kain games? And do the remasters bring the games to modern standards? Well, thanks to Sandbox Strategies, I was able to get the game early in order to tell you just that. I got the code on Friday, and unfortunately that meant I didn't get to play too much of these games. So don't consider this a full-on review of these 2 games, mainly just first impressions. So let's take a look at Legacy of Kain 1+2 Remastered, and see if I think I could recommend this game to newcomers, as I am a newcomer myself, or for fans of the original game, if the games are brought up to modern standards. And with that, let's dive into this remaster. The game stars Raziel, a lieutenant to the vampire Lord Kain. Though after gaining vampire wings, Kain broke his wings and casted him to the Lake of the Dead, where Raziel would feel eternal pain and relentless agony, until 500 years had passed where it finally stopped, and is awoken to a voice of the Elder God who had arisen him from the agony to enact revenge on Kain and restore Nosgoth. And though Kain admits he would rather die, the sound of revenge does sound pretty good actually, so he decides to accept the mission. But now for the gameplay, and it is actually a bit more ambitious than I thought it was. The game isn't really level based, nor is it open world. It's like a gigantic linear level, which is actually pretty impressive on PlayStation 1, and unlike say Batman and Robin on PlayStation 1, the ambition furthers the gameplay rather than detracting from it from lack of polish or simply just having too big of a head. Thankfully, this knows what it wants and takes time and care in polishing the innovation. The game feels huge and is like a giant adventure, and making the game feel even bigger is the real-time shifting mechanic to shift between the human realm and the spectral realm. The spectral realm is technically a second life, where once you die in the human realm, you can claim souls to regain your health, and can shift back to the human realm at a certain point. But that's not the only way to shift between the realms. When you're in the human realm, you can shift back into the spectral realm at any point in time, and there's no loading screen or pause or anything. It just happens. Changing the lighting and even some geometry, phasing between the realms changes the level design to help you advance by opening up different pathways to complete puzzles. Not only that, but in the spectral realm, your impact on the human realm is weightless, and this is used for some really smart platforming. Like this puzzle here, where you use the weight of the human realm to make this platform higher, then shift back to the spectral realm to get back on the platform and use it to reach this higher area. The open design gameplay does, however, have a couple of drawbacks. Now, because of the Souls mechanic and the Spectral Realm being a second life kinda, it is safe to say that it's pretty hard to die in this game, and at least what I played anyway. But if you do die, you are sent all the way back to the beginning of the level and have to go all the way back to where you died. Now, the game does try to mitigate this by the portal mechanic, which does work really well, especially compared to the PlayStation 1. However, in order to use the portal system, you have to go by these symbols in order to know where you're teleporting to. And they aren't symbols you can easily remember. I think they should have been numbers or letters rather than these symbols, because these are not very easy to remember. However, this issue is made a little better in the remaster, because as far as I can tell, what I'm about to say was not present in the original game, but using the L button on the controller, you can pull up a map which shows the symbols and gives you a rough idea where the symbols are. It is still a pain, but using the map does help a bit more. And according to a review guide supplied by Sandbox Strategies, this map was not only made by Aspyr and Crystal Dynamics, but even key members of the community, which is a nice way to reward the community for these games. And if that's as true as it sounds, that's actually really cool. That's the main thing though, is the backtracking, where once you have a certain ability, you have to backtrack to other areas in order to progress. Saying all this out loud though, well, while writing this in a script I mean, this is just Metroid Prime before Metroid Prime, with ghouls and vampires. Wait, does that make this a Metroidvania? Looking it up on Google, there is actually a lot of debate on whether it is or isn't. So if you do consider it as one, does that make this the first Metroidvania? Or at least a 3D one? Of course, like I said, you do have to agree with the sentiment because most people see this game more like a Zelda-like due to its puzzles and gameplay feeling more like Zelda. The problem with it being that, however, is you need to complete the puzzles in order to progress. But sometimes the puzzle isn't about progressing, but rather just finding where you need to progress. There were a couple of instances where I was absolutely stumped on where to go, and it wasn't because I couldn't solve the puzzle, but it was because I didn't know where the puzzle was supposed to lead. Like this stack of boxes you have to put at this wall to go to the passageway. I had no idea it was even there. If this sounds like a problem you might have, you may need to have a long play handy to help you out. Or maybe I'm probably just a dunce and you won't have that problem, I don't know. Also like Zelda is the lock-on mechanic, though it is not as strict as Zelda and adds a lot more cinematic flair to the combat, which I really liked. The combat could be pretty annoying to some, because since you're in the world of ghouls, most enemies need to be taken out and also impaled by a sharp object in order to defeat them. But some you have to actually claim their souls or else they can actually reclaim their bodies and get back in the action like nothing happened. Both of these attributes make the combat, especially in groups, a little bit more stressful, and it makes sense in this world, so it's pretty cool in my books. I didn't play far enough to get this sword that you apparently get in the game, which is kind of unfortunate, but hey, what can you do? Play Soul Reaver 2? Yeah, probably. Well, I guess in the ending of the last game, Raziel wasn't successful in enacting revenge on Kain, because we find out that he's still alive and we have to chase him down.
Kain's very existence is a cancer upon this world.
And Raziel gets caught up in something bigger, with a bunch of characters wanting different things from Raziel, and even Kain tries to pull his strings. But we're just gonna go ahead and skip to the gameplay for this one because I didn't get too much of the story, despite how many cutscenes there were. Okay, Soul Reaver 2 is a bit odd compared to the first one. While the first Soul Reaver was a bit like a Metroidvania, arguably, Soul Reaver 2 is a lot more like an action-adventure game, with a lot more cutscenes. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but I have to imagine that this change was a bit drastic, especially if you came right out of the first game like I did. It took me about 3 hours to finally get into a puzzle, so it's a way more linear package, cutting out a lot of backtracking, which I like, but I know people who would probably prefer the first Soul Reaver, so it's just a little odd is all. Looking at reviews and impressions though, apparently it seems people did like that it trimmed out a lot of the fat of the gameplay and having a bigger focus on story, making the game as a whole a lot more engaging. So hey, I guess I'm in the minority, I suppose? But I guess that makes me feel better in saying I actually did like this game, and it was a bit better of a time going through this one since the puzzle solving was so thinned down. The only problem though is that Soul Reaver 2 has a very archaic save system, which was not fixed in the remaster. You can only save at certain points in the game, so if you're stuck in that puzzle I just mentioned, well, I guess you're out of luck if you had a dentist appointment because you got to do the entire thing all over again when you get back. This was kind of frustrating because I was struggling a little bit on the Sun Temple puzzle because I'm terrible at puzzles. Not the game's fault, of course, as it's pretty simple, as I said. I'm just a dunce. But I had to stop playing in order to start writing this section of the video. But I couldn't stop it because there wasn't a save point and I didn't want to have to redo this whole puzzle if I came back to this game soon. So I both felt the pressure of trying to hurry and do the puzzle while struggling with trying to solve it. And this is on PlayStation 2, why is this even a problem? And they should have fixed that problem with this remaster, in my personal opinion. But I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something? I guess you could argue that the lack of save did force me to play more of the game, but if you have to resort to that for more game time, that's not a good thing. Either way, the game is still really good despite these issues, though another problem I have is the Spectral Realm was not utilized as much as it was in the first game. I wasn't flip-flopping as much between it, which I thought was a killer feature for that first game. Though, again, please keep in mind that I only played about 3 hours, so maybe later in the game they utilize it more, who knows. And I don't know if this was an ability you learned in the first game or not, but Raziel even learned how to swim without going into the Spectral Realm. The swimming controls are very sensitive and kind of shit, but hey, good for Raziel. But even though I haven't played much of these two games, I can still say I highly recommend them. They are pretty cool games, and I really like the whole world and aesthetic of these games. But let's talk about that more. What does this remaster offer to older fans of the franchise? Well, I obviously can't speak too much since I've never played the original games, but judging by the very little knowledge I've seen while researching them, as far as I can tell, gameplay-wise, everything is pretty much the exact same. However, with some little, very minor but likely welcome improvements to the first game. As I said before, the map was added to the first game, and also the compass from the second game was added to the first. But also, camera controls was mapped to the right analog stick. And apparently you couldn't look up with the camera, therefore Aspyr made new skyboxes, which is pretty cool. Of course, there are remastered graphics across both games, and I think the games look amazing. Kinda looks like a PS1 and PS2 game ported over to Xbox 360, and I think that's pretty good. But if you don't like the new graphics, you can toggle between the old and new graphics with the press of a button. That was one thing I've always loved since Halo Combat Evolved, allowing players to switch between old and new graphics on the fly, even during cutscenes, which is always a great feature. Unfortunately, I did see a few minor but noticeable visual hiccups, most across both graphic settings, namely the portals in Soul Reaver 1. I also ran into some stuttering on Soul Reaver 1. I assume it happens when loading into another area, and it can range from a quick hiccup to a very deep hiccup. You know, like one of those ones that make your entire body shake. You know which one I'm talking about. But finally, here's the good stuff. The extra content. Because once you boot up the game through its admittedly very boring menu, you can access the bonus content, and not only is there a collection of renders, fan art, and even some cool cosplay, you get some outtakes from the voice cast.
There's a lot of talk for a video game. You're so used to sort of doing 5 lines different. Go through that door! Don't go through that door! Hey, go through that door!
Lore reader for extra information, and levels cut from the original game. As I said before, the first Soul Reaver game went through some troubled development, resulting in a bunch of content for the game getting cut. That's that cut content. All of the levels in their semi-playable state are all here and are available to explore, which is so cool. And I think Legacy of Kain fans are gonna get a lot of mileage out of exploring what wasn't. But yeah, that's it for these two games. I can definitely understand the love for this franchise now that I've gotten my first hand looking at them. My only complaint is that I didn't have enough time to play these games the full way through. But I hope that this review has exposed you to this franchise, and I hope you at least consider checking it out, as I really wound up enjoying it. Maybe someday we can dive deeper into these games in a future video. Let me know if you guys are down for that, as I would be really happy, as this collection has definitely piqued my interest on this franchise. Consider me a Soul Reaver enjoyer. So if any of you are interested, make sure to go check out Soul Reaver 1+2 Remastered, releasing tomorrow, December 10th on every single current gen and last gen platform. That's Cream, Fortnite, Cock.com, PS4, PS5, Nintendo Witch, Xbone, and Xbox Series X with X. So if you have one of these platforms,
Pre-order, preload, pre-cut.
And thanks again to Sandbox Strategies for the review code so I could hopefully recommend this game to you. And with that,
May you have 3 balls in the morning. I appreciate y'all, baby. Yeah!